6 weeks after my best friend's baby was born, my father-in-law showed up at my door holding a car seat. Not knocking gently. Not texting first. Just standing in my hallway at 7 in the evening with a gray infant car seat in one hand and the kind of expression on his face that men wear when they've already decided you're going to say yes. I had just gotten home from a 10-hour shift at the site. I was still in my work boots. There was drywall dust on my jacket and I was thinking about nothing. Except whether I had enough eggs for an omelet. Then I opened the door and there he was. My ex-wife's father. Harold, the man who had watched his daughter spend 2 years sleeping with my best friend. The man who had sat across from me at Christmas dinners and shaken my hand and called me son. The man who had cried at my wedding. Standing at my door with a car seat. I looked at the car seat, then at him. No, I said. He blinked. I haven't said anything yet. You brought a car seat to my apartment, Harold. You said plenty. His jaw tightened the way it always did when he wasn't getting what he expected. Just give me 10 minutes. I should have closed the door. My therapist, a very patient woman named Dr. Arsenal in Halifax, had spent months teaching me that I did not have to open every door just because someone knocked. But I made the mistake of looking at Harold's face. He looked older. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. And something about that, the exhaustion in him, made me step back. I regretted it immediately. He walked into my apartment and looked around the way people do when they're hoping to find evidence that you're falling apart. Dishes in the sink, empty bottles. Some sign that the life they helped destroy had left you hollow. Instead he saw a clean kitchen, a second-hand couch I'd refinished myself, a shelf of books, and a photo of me and my younger brother from a canoe trip in Cape Breton, where we both got sunburned and neither of us complained about it. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. That seemed to bother him. He sat down at my kitchen table. I stayed standing by the counter. What do you want? I asked. He set the car seat on the chair beside him. It's about the baby. The baby, that was what I'd been calling him in my head too, because using his name made it too real. Sawyer. That was what my ex-wife Melissa had named him. Sawyer James. Born 6 weeks ago at the IWK in Halifax. 6 pounds 11 ounces, dark hair. I knew that because Melissa's sister had texted me a picture without asking whether I wanted one. A tiny squinting face wrapped in a hospital blanket, innocent. Completely innocent. That was the thing that made all of this so hard. I didn't blame the baby. I had never blamed the baby. I blamed the 2 adults who created him while I was working overtime to pay our mortgage. Harold folded his hands on the table. Melissa is struggling. I almost laughed. Of course that was where he started. Not the baby is struggling. Not I'm sorry for what my daughter did to you. Melissa. Always Melissa. Sishi, I said. Not a question. She's exhausted. The baby has reflux, he barely sleeps and Dex isn't stepping up. Dex. My best friend of 14 years. Dex Haverford. Who had been the best man at my wedding. Who had stood beside me at the altar and shaken my hand. And told me I was the luckiest guy he knew. Who had then spent 2 years sleeping with my wife in our house, in our city, while I worked construction contracts up in Labrador City, for months at a time sending money home. Fatherhood didn't change him? I said. Harold flinched. He's not ready for this kind of responsibility. I stared at him. Was I ready when you all asked me to pretend this baby might be mine and stay in the marriage? His eyes went to the table. That was a different situation. It really wasn't. You just liked that version better because I was carrying the weight. He took a slow breath. Dex shows up maybe once a week. He keeps saying he needs time. He missed the 2-week pediatric appointment. He missed the 6-week checkup. He sent money once. Melissa's mother and I have been helping but we can't keep. Harold. He stopped. Why are you in my apartment? He looked up. Because you're stable. Because you're the kind of man who. Don't. He blinked. Don't use that word with me. I crossed my arms. I know what stable means in this family. Stable means Sawyer will carry the weight so nobody else has to. It means you're reliable so we can be unreliable. It means Sawyer will pay his bills and not make scenes, so let's pile everything onto Sawyer and call it a compliment. Harold's face shifted. That's not what I'm saying. Then say what you're saying. He was quiet for a moment. Then, that child needs a father figure. You were married to his mother. You. I was married to his mother while she was sleeping with my best friend. That sentence doesn't end where you want it to end. Harold's mouth pressed into a line. I know you're angry. I'm not angry. Angry was 6 months ago. Right now I'm just tired of people acting like my boundaries are a character flaw. He reached toward the car seat. I stood up straight. What are you doing? I brought some pictures. Harold. He stopped. You do not get to sit in my apartment and hand me baby photos like they're evidence in a case you're building against me. I kept my voice even. I'm not saying Sawyer is guilty of anything. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve love, but you are not going to use his face to rewrite what happened in my marriage. Harold's eyes filled. He was a big man, broad-shouldered. The kind of guy who coached minor hockey for 20 years and never cried at anything. Watching him tear up was strange in the way that watching a building shift is strange. Wrong, off balance. He's going to need someone, Harold said quietly. Yes, I said. He's going to need his father, his actual father. Harold looked at me for a long moment. Dex isn't going to be that. Then that's a tragedy. But it's not my tragedy to fix. He left 10 minutes later, still holding the car seat, still looking at me like I had failed some test I hadn't agreed to take. Before he stepped into the hallway, he turned back. You used to be a good man, Sawyer. I held the door. I still am. That's why I'm not doing this. I closed it and stood in my kitchen for a while, listening to the sound of the building's old heating system clicking on. Then I made the omelet. It was fine. The divorce had been finalized 4 months earlier. Melissa had kept the house because I let her. Partly because I didn't want to fight over a mortgage that had my name on it and her boyfriend's fingerprints on every surface I could think of. And partly because my lawyer had told me the fastest path through was the cleanest one. I had moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in the south end of Dartmouth. Close enough to work. Far enough from everything that used to be my life. I had blocked Dex on everything the day I found out. That wasn't a dramatic decision. It was just the only one that made sense. There was nothing to say. He knew what he'd done. I knew what he'd done. Any conversation we had was just going to be him explaining himself, and me having to pretend that explanations were worth something. Melissa and I had one final conversation through our lawyers. After that, her sister Patrice was the only line of communication, and only for paperwork. I went to therapy. I picked up extra shifts when the work was there. I started running again, which I hadn't done since university, and I was bad at it in a way that felt honest. I called my brother more often. His name was Fletcher, and he lived in Fredericton with his wife and their 2 kids. And he was one of maybe 3 people in the world who didn't try to explain anyone else's behavior to me, or suggest I was being too hard on people. I was not too hard on people. I was just done being soft in ways that cost me things. 2 months after Harold's visit, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local. I almost didn't answer. Then I did. It was Patrice. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, she said. That's a fair opening. She said a sound that was almost a laugh. Harold told Melissa he came to see you. She didn't ask him to. I sat down. I know. She was furious. A pause. She asked me to call you because she figured you'd hang up on her. She figured right. She wants you to know she didn't send him. And she wants you to know something else. Patrice's voice got careful. Harold has been telling people things. About you.
What things?
That you refused to help. That you turned your back on an innocent baby. That you're still so wrapped up in your own hurt that you can't see past it. I was quiet for a moment. There's more, Patrice said. Of course there is. He told our Uncle Glenn that you had agreed to be involved and then changed your mind. He's building a version of this where you made a promise and walked away from it. My jaw tightened. I had made no such promise. Not to Harold, not to Melissa, not to anyone. The only thing I'd promised in that hallway was to hear him out, and I'd done that. Is Melissa pushing back on that? I asked. Patrice hesitated. She's trying. He doesn't really listen to her either. I thought about that. Why are you telling me this? Because you were a good brother-in-law, she said quietly. And because what's being said about you isn't true, and I thought you deserved to know. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and thought about Harold building a story. I had seen it coming, actually. Not the specific shape of it, but the general architecture. People like Harold don't stop when you close the door. They go find another one. The next day I called Fletcher and told him everything. He listened without interrupting, which was one of the things I loved about him. When I finished, he said he told people you made a promise. Yeah, you have anything in writing? No. But I have screenshots of every message he's sent since the divorce. Fletcher was quiet for a second. Keep them. Already, on it. The family gathering came 3 weeks later. It was my ex-wife's cousin's engagement party. At a restaurant in Bedford. And I would not normally have gone near it, except that Harold had told 3 different relatives I'd been invited and was too bitter to show up. When that got back to me through Patrice, I understood what was happening. If I didn't go, I was the cold one. If I did go, he'd try to manufacture a moment. Either way, he was writing the story. I decided to go and write my own. My brother drove up from Fredericton for the weekend, which was more than I deserved and exactly what I needed. He stood with me at the entrance of the restaurant and looked at the folder I was holding and said, "You really brought documents to an engagement party." "I brought the truth to a place where lies live," I said. Fletcher looked at me. "That's either very cool or very sad. Probably both." Inside I saw Patrice first. She caught my eye and gave me a small nod. Melissa was near the back, holding Sawyer in a blue wrap carrier against her chest. She looked exhausted in the real way, not the performed way. When she saw me come in, something moved across her face that I didn't try to read. Dex was there too, standing near the bar with his jacket half off, talking to someone I didn't recognize. He saw me and went very still. I looked at him for exactly 2 seconds. Then I looked away. He didn't deserve more than 2 seconds. Harold moved toward me before I'd even taken off my coat. Sawyer, he said, arms slightly open like he was expecting a hug. I stepped back. Harold. His arms dropped. He recovered quickly, because Harold was good at recovering. I'm glad you came. It means a lot. I'm sure. People nearby were already watching. Harold lowered his voice. Tonight isn't about any of that, it's family. I looked at him steadily. It's been family the whole time. That's kind of the problem. He laughed a little, the way people do when they're hoping the social friction will just dissolve. Then he glanced toward Melissa and the baby carrier, and I watched his face do the thing it always did. Calculate. She's right over there, he said. I see her, you could just say hello to the baby. Just for a moment. Harold, he's grown so much you'd be surprised, Harold. I kept my voice low and clear. We're not doing this. His face shifted. I just think if you saw him, you'd feel differently. Or, I said, you'd take a photo and text it to Glenn with some caption about how Sawyer's walls are coming down. Harold went pale. I said it quietly enough that only he could hear it. I know what you've been telling people. I know about the promise you invented. I know what you told Glenn. And I know that if I hold that baby tonight, you'll spend the next month telling everyone it means I'm coming around. He opened his mouth. I'm not coming around, I said. I came tonight because you've been using my absence to write a version of me that isn't true. So here I am, in person, saying clearly, to you and to whoever is listening, I did not abandon that baby. I was never his father. And I will not be pressured into standing in the space his actual father refuses to fill. The conversation nearby had gone quiet. Patrice had drifted closer. So had my brother. Though he stayed a step back. Harold straightened. You're making a scene. You made the scene, I said. I'm just showing up to it. He shook his head. He's innocent, Sawyer. He didn't do anything wrong, I know that. I've said that. The baby is innocent. That's true. And it's also true that the fact of his innocence doesn't make me responsible for him. Harold's voice rose just slightly. Dex isn't going to step up. You know that. Melissa can't do this alone. Then Melissa can take Dex to family court, I said. Which, by the way, she should do. There are lawyers in this province who handle exactly this situation. There are child support guidelines in Nova Scotia that are very clear. What there isn't is any legal or moral obligation that falls on me. Someone behind Harold made a sound. I glanced past him and saw that Glenn had drifted over. Glenn was in his 60s, retired from the Navy, and had the kind of face that had made opinions for decades without ever being questioned about them. He looked at me like I was something he'd found on the bottom of his shoe. Big man, Glenn said, walking away from a baby. I looked at him. Glenn, is that what Harold told you happened? Glenn shrugged. I know what I know. I opened my folder. Glenn's eyes moved to it. Harold's face went tight. I pulled out the first page. This is a text from Harold, sent to Melissa, 3 days after I told him I wasn't going to take on a fatherhood role. In it he says, and I'll just read this quietly, Sawyer will come around. He's always been the responsible one. Just give him time and he'll do the right thing. I looked up. I didn't agree to come around. He decided that on my behalf. Glenn blinked. I pulled out the second page. This is a message Harold sent to my brother Fletcher, asking Fletcher to talk some sense into me. He described me as, again quoting directly, too proud to do what's right. I lowered the page. I wasn't too proud, I was too clear. Harold said, voice tight, you're doing this here, tonight? You did this here, I said. For months. You told stories about me at family gatherings I wasn't at, to people who couldn't ask me for my side. So yes, tonight I'm here, and I'm giving my side. Patrice stepped forward. Her voice was steady. Uncle Harold, Melissa told you not to involve Sawyer. She said that in August. I was there. Harold's jaw worked. I was trying to help. You were trying to manage, Patrice said. There's a difference. Glenn looked between us. Some of the certainty had left his face. Then Melissa's voice came from across the room. Not loud, just clear. Harold. Everyone looked. She had walked over with Sawyer still in the carrier, one hand resting on the baby's back. She looked at her father with an expression I hadn't seen on her face before. It wasn't, is angry. It was tired. Specifically the kind of tired that comes from watching someone do damage while calling it love. Stop, she said. Harold turned. Melissa. Stop talking about Sawyer like he owes us something. Stop bringing him into conversations where he isn't there to defend himself. Stop. She looked around at the cluster of people who'd gathered, relatives and half-strangers holding wineglasses, watching. Sawyer was my husband. I hurt him. He doesn't owe me a co-parent. He doesn't owe my son a father. He doesn't owe this family anything. The room was quiet in the specific way of a room, where too many people are trying not to look like they're listening. Harold said, softly, Melissa, think about Sawyer. I am thinking about Sawyer, she said. She looked at the baby. He deserves to know the truth about where he came from and who his father is. His father is Dex. She looked across the room to where Dex was standing, with his jacket still half off, expression unreadable. And I will spend every day making sure Dex cannot pretend otherwise. Dex looked away. That was the most honest thing I'd ever seen him do. Glenn cleared his throat and wandered back toward the bar. Patrice caught my eye and gave me the smallest nod. My brother appeared at my elbow. Harold sat down heavily in a nearby chair. He looked old. Not in a satisfying way. Just in the way that people look when they finally run out of a thing they've been running on. I looked at him for a moment. I didn't feel victorious. I had come prepared to fight, and the fight had ended before I'd needed to use most of what I brought. That wasn't triumph. That was just the strange flatness that comes when something is actually over. I crossed to where he was sitting. He looked up. "I don't hate you, Harold," I said. "I know you love your daughter, and I know you love that baby. But you spent months building a version of me that you could use, and I needed to dismantle it. Not to hurt you. Because it wasn't true." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I just wanted someone to step up." "I know," I said. "But wanting something doesn't make it someone else's job to give it to you." I picked up my folder and my jacket and walked with my brother out of the restaurant into the November cold. The harbor was dark and the air smelled like salt and exhaust. And the particular cold that settles into Halifax in late autumn. Fletcher put his hands in his pockets. "How are you doing?" he asked. I thought about it honestly. "I don't know. Better than I expected." We walked to the car. Behind us through the restaurant windows, I could see Melissa standing with Sawyer in the carrier, talking to someone, one hand on the baby's back. She looked like a woman figuring out how to carry something heavy for a very long time. I hoped she found a way that didn't cost her more than she had left. I got into the car and my brother drove us back across the bridge. The fallout was quieter than I expected. Glenn didn't call me, but he stopped liking Harold's Facebook posts about the situation, which Patrice told me about, and which I considered a small diplomatic victory. Two of Melissa's aunts reached out over the following weeks, both saying versions of the same thing. They hadn't heard my side before. They didn't realize how things had actually gone. They were sorry. I thanked them and kept the conversations short. I wasn't looking to rebuild anything with that family. I was just looking to stop being the villain in a story I hadn't written. Dex, as far as I could tell, had no such reckoning. He was still in Halifax. Still working at the same firm, still posting on social media like a man, with no particular weight on his conscience. Melissa had filed for formal child support through Service Nova Scotia. A schedule had been established. He was paying in the minimum the formula required, and showing up on the days a written agreement told him to, which was apparently the maximum anyone was going to get out of him. That was probably as close to accountability as Dex Haverford was ever going to experience. And I made a deliberate decision to let that be enough. Not because it was enough. Because chasing something more was going to cost me time I didn't want to spend. My brother called every couple of weeks. "Dr. Arsenal said I was making real progress," which was the kind of thing therapists said and which I was choosing to believe. I went back to running badly. In the early mornings along the waterfront, I started a course in project management at NSCC because the construction company I worked for had been hinting at a supervisor role for a year, and I had been too distracted by my own life falling apart to pursue it. I applied, I got it. The pay increase was significant enough to actually feel like something. I kept the apartment. I bought a better bed frame. I kept the second-hand couch because I liked it, and because refinishing it myself had been the first productive thing I had done after everything fell apart, and there was something I wasn't ready to let go of in that. Harold sent me a letter in December. A real letter, envelope and stamp, handwritten on the kind of stationery that meant he'd thought about it. I stood over the recycling bin holding it and then, against everything practical in me, opened it. It was 2 pages. He said he loved his daughter. He said he loved the baby. He said he had handled things badly, and that he had been wrong to put the story together the way he had. He said he still believed, this in his heart, that Sawyer deserved a good male figure in his life. There it was. Even inside an apology, there was still a request. I wrote across the envelope. "This is not an apology. This is the same ask in different handwriting." I put it back in the mail. Maybe that was ungenerous. I slept well that night. Sawyer turned 3 months old in January. I know that because Patrice texted me, not with a photo, just with the information, like she thought I should have it. I sat with that for a while. I don't know what Sawyer will be told when he's old enough to ask questions. I hope Melissa tells him the truth gently. Not all of it at once. Not the ugly mechanics of it. But enough so that he doesn't grow up in a fog like the one his parents built. I hope Dex does something with himself before it's too late to matter. I hope Harold finds a way to love his daughter, without using other people as tools to do it. And I hope I keep doing what I've been doing. Building something real out of what's left. One unromantic day at a time. People sometimes think that refusing to help is the same as refusing to care. It isn't. I thought about that baby more than I told anyone. I still do. But thinking about someone doesn't mean you owe them your life. Loving someone from a distance doesn't mean you're obligated to let the people who hurt you use that love as leverage. I did not abandon Sawyer. I was never his father. I was the man his actual parents betrayed, and I refused to stand in the gap they left and let them call it redemption. His father was there the whole time. He just needed people to stop handing him someone else's flotation device and let him figure out how to swim. That's what I did. And for the first time in longer than I can remember, I think I'm going to be alright.